Are you a fan of Hollywood Homicide? So stick around because we're going to mention the top 5 Harrison Ford movies of all time. Hollywood Homicide is an underrated classic. No, I'm kidding. It's a terrible movie. I mentioned it in another video where Josh Hartnett and Harrison Ford did not get along with each other. Harrison Ford has a long career, and a lot of his movies, typically, especially during the 90s, they were about him trying to find his wife. Where's my wife? My wife's kidnapped. Where are my kids?
You mean like Liam Neeson?
Yeah, Liam Neeson is the modern Harrison Ford. He is. I was tempted to put Star Wars on this list, but I can't because he's at the forefront of the series. He's character in the series as an ensemble. So we're concentrating on movies where Harrison Ford is the pivotal character. He's the protagonist of the film. We're excluding movies where he's a secondary character. So number 5 is Get Off My Plane, and that's Air Force One. Air Force One came out in the 90s, and this is such like a Bill Clinton era movie. It hasn't aged well, but I love it. You know, he's in a plane, and he gets kidnapped, and it's basically Harrison Ford, get off my plane, against the whole terrorism in the plane. Of course, if this movie came out today, which technically already kind of did, which is Olympus Has Fallen, it's basically the same movie, so they would still make the movie again, even if it's not a direct remake. If you watch the movie and pretend it's not a real political drama, you're gonna have a good time with it. Sure, some of the effects haven't aged well, especially the way the plane looks in some night sequences hasn't aged very well, especially the specific scene at the end. I don't want to ruin, but it hasn't aged well. So, but still a great film. It's very entertaining. I love it. Number 4 is Where's My Wife? You find this man. He's a one-armed man. Find him. That's Harrison Ford in The Fugitive. This movie was a big blockbuster back in the 90s. This is actually a remake of a TV series that came out in the 60s. And I've never seen the TV series, I've only seen this movie. And every time I watch this movie, there's a scene that I laugh in, and I don't know why. It's not intended to be funny, at least I don't think it is. It's a scene that you've probably seen in trailers, or it's been parodied in The Simpsons, where Harrison Ford is in a canal, and he has his hands up, he turns around, he sees Tommy Lee Jones, and he's pointing the gun at him, and he tells Tommy Lee Jones, I didn't kill my wife! And then Tommy Lee Jones says, I don't care! I don't know why I find that funny. And then he jumps off to a river, and you can tell it's a fucking doll falling into the river. Anyway, I find it funny. I have low standards in humor. So, The Fugitive, what's great about it is that you're trying to find out who is this one-armed man. Who is the guy who killed Dr. Kimball's wife? It also has a great detective played by Tommy Lee Jones. It's probably one of his best roles that I can think of. Sure, certain things in this movie hasn't aged well, but it's still a compelling story. I like to, even though I've seen this movie several times, I'm always intrigued by what's going to happen next because it's so well structured, it's so well done. And it follows the typical 3-act structure, but in a very unpredictable manner. And this was probably the movie that propelled the whole thing of, where's my wife, where are my kids? Because he did other movies very similar to this during the 90s, and even in the 2000s. Like, even the last one he did that followed that same story was a movie called Firewall, where his family's kidnapped and he has to find them. And, well, they're kidnapped in his own house. So it's not kidnapped, they're being held hostage. So they tried playing with that. They're not kidnapped, they're held hostage. But it's still the same story. So Liam Neeson has taken over that role now. So number 3 is a movie called Frantic. Not many people have heard of this film. This movie came out in 1988 and it was directed by Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski is the director of movies like Rosemary's Baby, The Pianist. And he did this movie in the 80s. And I think it kind of went under the radar and not many people have even caught up with it. It's out on Blu-ray. I'm pretty sure it's out in some streaming services. But it's also a story about his wife being kidnapped. This takes place in France, but even though his wife is being kidnapped, that's not really the most important thing about the story. It's the reasoning for something that he has in a briefcase in relation to the kidnapping. I'll just leave it at that because everything else that happens is so well done. I love this movie. I've seen it several times, and I've never been to France, but every time I watch this film, I feel like I'm in France. Because there's other films that I watch, and it's like, oh oui, oui, les juges, les parlez français. It seems like they're trying to make fun of French people, but here they're being very authentic. And I've shown this movie to other people who've lived in France, and they're like, yeah, this is actually how French people are and how France is. So Frantic is number 3 on my list. So what's number 2? Number 2, I want to put Hollywood Homicide here, man.
Fuck yeah.
Hollywood Homicide.
It's all about Josh Hartnett.
Yeah. Fuck, there's a scene in Hollywood Homicide where Harrison Ford is in a two-way mirror and he's starting to dance. Like he's like imaginary fucking. So number 2 is really Blade Runner. Now, I know a lot of people now prefer Blade Runner 2049 over the original, and even I've had an inclination of saying that Blade Runner 2049 is the best movie since Blade Runner. But this is the best one. This is the one that started it all. And I love this movie for the cinematography, the visual effects, the story. This is the movie that inspired so many other sci-fi films. Dark City, Gattaca, The Matrix, The Crow. The set designing has been imitated so many times. Even this new show that's out now called Altered Carbon, it's fucking Blade Runner. There's some scenes that are questionable in Blade Runner where Harrison Ford is with the replicant played by Sean Young, and the romance doesn't work. Sure, but everything else around it, it's a great science fiction film. It's about replicants. These are people who have a limited lifespan. They can only last 5 years, but they think they've had a life before that, but they have implants where they have childhood and everything that's happened before, but it belongs to someone else. And Harrison Ford's character, who's a Blade Runner, he's assigned to hunt them down. Question is he also a replicant? Fuck no! I don't care what Ridley Scott says. Like Ridley Scott says, oh, no, the only way the story can make sense is if he's a replicant too. Fuck you, Ridley Scott. He's not a replicant. He's actually a human. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with it. I think he's just getting senile. He's like close to like 80 something, so he thinks that he can say whatever he wants and it's like legit. If Denis Villeneuve hadn't directed Blade Runner 2049, it would have been a disaster.
Oh, he fucked up Alien Covenant and Prometheus. So.
Yeah, Alien Covenant was straight up garbage. So number one is Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is the movie that sure, Star Wars was the one that made him famous, but this is the one that made him a superstar. Everyone knows Indiana Jones, and when you see Indiana Jones, you see Harrison Ford. These two, I can't see, and unlike James Bond, where other people can play the character, I can't see someone else playing the character of Indiana Jones. Like when I saw Crystal Skull, and that scene where Shia LaBeouf, or Shia LaDouche, whatever his name is, grabs the hat, and he's about to place it on his head, and fucking Harrison Ford comes in and snatches that bitch and puts it on his head. I was like, thank God. That was like the only good thing about the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Him snatching that hat from Shia LaDouche, saying, get the fuck out of here. Go back to your Transformers. So, the reason why I like Raiders of the Lost Ark so much is because almost everything is practical and has a great story. It's this guy in search of the Ark of the Covenant, and there's someone else who wants it as well, and we don't know what's inside, and we all want to know what's inside. So we kind of become like Indiana Jones in search of what's in this Ark of the Covenant. And it's so exciting, and there's a sequence that's so good, where it's just called the Desert Chase sequence, where Indy is with a horse, and he's riding, and he's trying to get the Ark back, and it has a great score by John Williams. It's one of those movies I can watch over and over again and never get tired of. And of course, you know, Temple of Doom and Last Crusade are great. Fuck Crystal Skull. So anyway, guys, these are the top 5 Harrison Ford movies of all time. And remember, get off my plane. Where's my wife? You find this man. The one-armed man. Fuck. I don't know how he does it. Anyway, guys, make sure to like and subscribe. Share this video with all the Harrison Ford fans or people who like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, or movies in general. I'm Vest Guy, and this was Vest Top 5, and until next time.